Okay, hey everybody, you're going to get a email or an email, and it's going to have your marks in there if you've requested a marks program built for you. And it's going to have your last name, Henry Marks, spring of 2024. This one happens to be for Mr. Henry. Alcoin is up here, and then I'm making others as we go. When you get it, you'll have block A, B, C, and D, and then there's a data tab over here. This tab pulls all of the information from the operations sheet that the guidance department and the front office are in control of, right? And so I added a few students and a fake course onto the operations sheet really quickly just to give a demonstration because I didn't want students' names to show up in this video in case, I don't know, it gets out or something like that. So Mr. Henry has a course, and he's going to go to his timetable and choose his course. So you'll have your timetables. Here it is. But let's pretend like Mr. Henry teaches underwater basket weaving in block A. So we would go and we would click underwater basket weaving. And it's going to remind you that you're not supposed to be doing this, but just this first time it's okay. And there you go. You got Will Smith, Dr. Dre, and Mr. Spock in his course, okay? Now, you'll notice that there is a whole bunch of blank space here because, well, he only has 3 students because not a lot of students want to take underwater basket weaving, and so it's just 3. So what you're going to want to do is highlight from 11 all the way down to the word just above the word total, okay? And I'll zoom out a bit so you can kind of see this. You can change the view zooming right here. So we'll go 75. I'll go up a little bit. Well, maybe we'll even go to 50. I've made it so that you can fit a lot of students on each one of these, just in case you happen to have a lot of students. Now, Mr. Henry obviously has not very many. And so I'm going to right-click this orange bar over there. You're going to get a lot of options, and the one you want to do is hide rows 11 through 31. And it'll again remind you that you're not supposed to do this, but that's okay. This time it's all right. So there we have it. And now what we've done is we've just hidden all the blank rows, okay, for students. And then you're going to want to do that again down here. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way down, and I'm going to hide these rows. Okay, again, and then I'm going to do it again down here. And there we go. It's going to take some time here. There we go. All the way up. You don't want to, hide highlight the median and hide all that stuff. You want to go down to 98 and again, hide rows. Okay. And I think pretty much you got to do it 4 times. Okay. And then hide rows again, all the way down to the median. All right. Hide rows. Okay. So there we have it, and then this bottom one you don't really have to do because this is the last one. All right, so now let's go back up to the top. Let's zoom back in, and let's see what we have here. So our course is underwater basket weaving, and your name will probably show up somewhere as well, I think. Oh, no, it's up here, actually. And this is your block A. Now, you would do a similar thing for block B. You would go, let's say you have no class, block B. You can leave it as a none, or you could even put this as a spare. And what will happen is the students with a spare will not, they'll show up just in case you want to know which students have a spare on your spare, for example. Otherwise, you would place your class. It would populate with your students. I'm not going to do that again, so I don't want our students' names to show up. I only prepared the fake class for block A. Anyway, here we go. We got Will Smith, Dr. Dre, Mr. Spock taking this class. Let's see what these things are. This first section here that I've highlighted in orange, this is your assessments as and for, right? So these are diagnostics for assessments for, and formatives or assessment as. Okay, and so let's say Mr. Henry has a diagnostic. So he would probably, he would say, unit water diagnostic. Okay, okay, I'm just gonna quickly go through. And this is the date, this is the due date or the date that the student submitted it to you. So let's say it's due on the 6th. If you want, you can change that to the date due. And then this is the date that you return the work. Our goal is to try and get stuff back at a reasonable time frame. So, maybe two days later is pretty good. Now, let's say he's got just like some categories 4, 4, 4, and 4. Everybody's got zeros in here, and then I can just go ahead and write a 4, 4, 4, and 4 because Will Smith is pretty good. 3, 3, 3, and 3 because Dr. Dre's not so good. And maybe Mr. Spock. Oh, well, actually, Mr. Spock probably would be pretty good, but whatever. Let's say Mr. Spock got a 50%. And there you have it. This 16 represents the total number of points available. This is the median, right? So you can see here that the median is 75, all right? And up here, if these are the things that the ministry would like us to keep track of, right? So what are these things? This is a conversation, an observation, a student product, peer assessed, or self-assessed, okay? And if you could have all of these, actually. You could have a conversation, an observation, where they produce some work and they do a little bit of peer assessment and self-assessment. If they're all present in the assessment, then all boxes should be checked. And if the ministry folks ask, hey, why do you have conversation here? Well, then you should be able to explain in a reasonable way that, yeah, I had a conversation with each one of these students regarding their water knowledge, or whatever, something, and then I observed them perform a task where they turned in a student product, and then the student product was assessed by their peers in a group, and not only that, I gave them an opportunity to do maybe like a self-reflection at the end or something like that. Okay? Now, obviously, you're not necessarily going to have all of these checked. All right? And so these are the diagnostics and formatives, or assessments as and for, okay? So these don't get used to calculate the final mark of the student. What does? So the stuff that gets counted, as we know, to calculate the final mark of the student is the assessments of, which is down here, right? So let's say Mr. Henry now has he did a diagnostic, he did a assessment as a formative, okay? Oops, there's a 4 here that shouldn't be here. And now he's doing a unit test on the water section, all right? And in this section, there is some knowledge, where you're 10 points awarded in knowledge, maybe 50 points in thinking. Could be none in application. Excuse me. And a few points in communication. Okay, so there we have it. Total of 33 points if possible in this assessment. So then let's say that, Will Smith gets a 10, a 15, a 0, and an 8. So there it is. He has 100%, right? And I'll start these out as being checked, actually. So, excuse me. So now you'll see that no grade shows up here until you unexempt Will Smith from this. So now Will Smith is, as soon as you unclick this box, he will now be responsible for having to earn these 33 points, and these are the points that get added to his total allotted points for the class. So he's clearly earned 33 points, and he's responsible for a total of 33 points, and so therefore he has a 100 currently in the class, okay? And let's say Dr. Dre never took the test, and so because he showed up late, and for whatever reason you are talking to the administration and it's decided that he doesn't need to take this test, well, then you leave him as being exempt, all right? Mr. Spock, let's say, again, is just not so good at this stuff here because, obviously it's pretty challenging, and so There it is. He gets a 48%. But notice he still has no mark here until you unclick this, and there you have it. He now has a 48%. All right. Let's change this. I'm going to change these all to 10s so we get nice round numbers, and you can kind of see how this works. And there you go. Let's say it's all 10s, actually. And so there's a total of 40, and Will Smith only has now 82. So now it comes time to make a second assessment. This 100% right here actually represent that this assessment so far is constitute 100% of the overall grade of the student, right? So what's going to happen now is I'm going to insert another assessment over here. Let's say it's 40 points for knowledge. Now look what happened. Each one of these now become 50 because this assessment right here now currently has 50% of the total 80 points, and this assessment has a total of 50% of the total 80 points. And so they're now 50-50. Right? But let's say this is actually just a quiz, but you accidentally made it out of 40 points, and you're like, oh, shoot, this is just a quiz for the second unit. I don't really want it to be equal in weight to the test on the water section. So this is where the weight thing starts to come into play. So if I'd like to take these 40 points and make them worth quite a bit less, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this assessment less weight in this category. Right now, each one of these points is weighted at a value of 1 point. So every 1 point in this section is worth 1 point. Just like over here, every 1 point in this section is worth 1 point. So now, let's say I want to make this test worth 20 instead of 40, but I can't just change the actual physical piece of paper and make it worth 20 because I already wrote 40. So how do I make it actually only worth 20 points? I change this down to a 0.5. And now what's going to happen is it's going to make this course, or this unit test equal to still 40 points, and this quiz will now be worth only 20 points, and this will now change to 66%, and this should change to 33. You see that? Because now this is worth 40 points out of a total of 60, and this is worth 20 points because each of these 40 is only worth half as much. Okay, so this is worth 20 points out of a total of 60. So 20 divided by 60 is 33, and 40 divided by 60 is 66. So let's say you're still not satisfied. You're saying, well, this is still worth way too much. So what you can do is you can play around with it. You can do a 0.1 if you want, and now each one of these points is worth 1/10 of a point. Let's say it's just a tiny little quiz, but it happened to have a lot of points on it for whatever reason, the way that you happen to be grading it, and you want to weigh it quite a bit less. You can take this weight down very, very far, or let's say you want to increase the weight. I can change it to a 2, and now all of a sudden this is now worth 80 points, where this is now worth 20 points. You can see this number constantly changes as we make these changes here. So when the gradebook starts out, you'll start with a 1 on each of these sections, and every point that you enter down in this green section, I think on your guys' computer it might be a different color because I've got dark mode enabled on my computer, and so I don't know what color you're going to end up getting. It depends on your computer. But this section, the total, every point that you put in here is equal to every other point that you put along this entire row, unless you go ahead and make some changes on the weight. And as you adjust this weight, these numbers change. And so let's say I add another test over here that is only worth 10 points. What's going to end up happening is these are both going to go down a little bit. Let's make it worth 20 points. All right. There you go. So this is now worth 40, this is worth 40, and this is worth 20 because there's a total of 100 points now. So these are going to continuously go down further and further and further, the more and more as you add tests, right? If you would like to project quite a bit further into the future, then what you're going to want to do is take a lot of these tests and fill them out early so that you're able to sort of predict each one of these, and you can get these weights figured out earlier. But you can play around with it however you want and things like that. Note that the students won't be charged for these points until you hit these buttons, right? These click boxes. So now look what happens. Notice everybody's grades went down because they are now responsible for this 40 points and they don't have any points, right? So now Will Smith, he just went down from an 82 to a 41.25 because he has a 0 in this section. So let's say I award him all 40 of these points. All of a sudden, he has a 91% because we're averaging 40 points out of 40 in this one and whatever he has here out of 40 in this one here, okay? So that's kind of how it works. Don't forget, you still have conversation observation, student product, you can do labs, you can change this to essay, if you want. So you can, these things you can actually change. So I can write essay. And if things are like essays, if you don't have labs in your course, maybe you can change these to whatever you want, okay? And that's pretty much it. Now notice there's no peer or self-assessment in this category because assessments of can't be graded on peer or self-assessed. They must be assessed by the teacher, okay? And that's pretty much it. Now the ministry wants a nice mix of conversation, observation, and student product. They also want a nice mix of knowledge, thinking, application, and communication, right? And you might say, well, how much is each percentage? For the ministry, they say that you can have any one category cannot be less than 10% of the overall, and any other category cannot be over 40% of the overall. So the lowest that any one of them can be is 10%, and the highest that anyone can be is 40, right? So for my math classes, generally I have 10% for communication, and then these are usually about 30 each. And do you have to hit 30 exactly? No, you don't. You just have to have a balance, right? That's it. Okay, and so that's pretty much what's going on with the grade book there. Now we'll go see the other things down below. This is a bummer. It's not really going down. I'll have it go down here. Okay, here's the reports. Okay, so at some point you're going to have a preliminary and a midterm, an update, and a final. In the most recent inspection, they wanted the teachers to start keeping track of these grades. So here they are. When it comes time for you to fill out the preliminary and the midterm, for example, what you would do is you would go over here. Well, let me get some grades. You would copy this and copy. And then you would go down to here, and let's say it's the midterm, and you would paste, but paste the values only. Don't paste the formula, paste the values. Because if you paste the formula, what will happen is as the semester rolls on, these numbers will change, right? So you want this to be a snapshot at their preliminary. So you're going to paste the values only, and there you go. There you go. And this is the number that you're going to be writing on the report, okay? On the midterm report. So let's say Will Smith actually has an 82, but for whatever reason you wanted to write an 85 because, I don't know, you feel like it should be an 85. You can go ahead and manually change that here, and that won't make any changes up to his grade. Look, he still has an 82, but what you wrote on the midterm was an 85. So the thing that actually gets written on the midterm is here, right? If you want, you can copy and paste it all over and then make modifications, or you can just sort of, I don't know, it's up to you. So you're going to want to go ahead and fill those out. These here are learning skills, and the ministry suggests that we keep track of the learning skills. They need to be documented, right? So you know that it's an E, G, S, and an N. If you forget what learning skills are, here's a link to Growing Success. So you can come up here. You can open up Growing Success in a different window and go ahead and see page 17. Okay. I'll get that in just a second. And let's say, so there's several times. So this is for the date. So this is the date of the evaluation. Double click the cell. So you're double click this cell. And let's say on the first week, after the first week of school, I go ahead and on the Monday, I go ahead and do some learning skills, right? So Will Smith is clearly excellent. And so I would go over and drag a bunch of excellence for him. Dr. Dre hasn't even shown up, so I wouldn't even fill those up. And obviously, Mr. Spock needs some improvement, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and needs some improvement, make some adjustments. Maybe it was actually a satisfactory and some initiative. He's pretty collaborative, so you go for a good instead, and things like that, right? And again, growing success. You go down to page 17, and this is a reminder of what these things are. Okay, so there's Mr. Henry's grades, and that's pretty much it. Now over here, this you're going to get to as the final exam. Okay, so you still have your people's names here: Will Smith, Dr. Dre, and Spock. Here, let me make this a bit smaller actually, because there's only a few students in the class. It's best to have that smaller. Okay. Then, so here we go. Now, in your coursework, let's say you have a 70%. This should be 70%. That is all of the work above, all of the assessments of. So this number 82 is used to calculate Dr. Dre, or Will Smith's grade, right? So he has 70% of 82, and so there it is. Okay, that's what this little section is. Now, Will Smith, if you go over this, like here, let's say you have a culminating task, and the culminating task is worth 10%, 0.1, and which makes the exam worth 20%, okay? And let's say you have two culminating tasks. Well, let's say this is 0.05, and this one is 0.05, okay? This one, as far as I know, should be pretty much always 70. And these guys can be various numbers depending on your course, okay? So now that you've got those set, you can cover those up. And now you've got a culminating task, another culminating task, and an exam, right? So the thing here is that, let's say, whatever. This works just like a normal grade thing. So let's say I've got 10 for this culminating task possible. Let's say I've only got 25 in this category, and then let's say the exam is worth, 15 and 15. I don't know. I'm just making numbers up. There should be, again, a balance in your culminating tasks as well. So there should be some knowledge, some application, and some knowledge. Oh, wait. Knowledge, thinking, communication, application. Knowledge, thinking, communication, apps. Oh, I got to change this, actually. Let me change that. There we go, and there we go. Okay, knowledge, thinking, communication, application. Actually, I should even change these two, make communication over there. I'll change that later. Whatever the case. We got these things in here. So now, as Will Smith starts to gain points, he got all of his points in his culminating task. He got all of these points because obviously he's a rock star, and there we go, and there we go. He now has an 87% in the overall course because, well, he had an 82, and, well, let's give him everything here. Let's go with a 10, and a 10, so that you can see he got 100, and he should have 100 down here as well. There you go. So we got 100 in his culminating, everything. You know what I mean? Mr. Spock, on the other hand, is pretty lame and just is kind of failing still. And there you go. He ends up with a 34%. Okay, that's kind of what's happening there. Dr. Dre never showed up, and so that's kind of the idea there. This you're gonna have to. It's nice to kind of cover that. You can scroll over and cover that over when you're doing all this stuff. If you go down to the bottom, there's something called student info. So there's the student's name. If you give them a book, you can write the book number in here. You can write their email in here, and you can write some notes and whatnot, right? There's also a section if you'd like to put their preliminary and midterm reports. Maybe down the road we're going to import these into the report cards, but it's not set up for that right now. Anyway, that's pretty much everything you want to know for the grade book. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be around all day, every day, to answer any questions. Alrighty.